the recording starting. We're going to cover fat today, but before we do that, I do want to review the blood glucose story. And in doing so, we'll probably review a bit on carbohydrates as well. Let me get through this story and the carbohydrate review. And then if you have questions, let me know. I'm thinking that we're going to also try to do breakout groups today for a couple of different reasons. So you get to know other people in the class. And so we could practice making sure that the breakout groups work in the classroom as well. Then that might take us about half the class, and then we'll get started on fat. We do have 2 learning modules that are new this week. We do have the fat learning module and the protein learning module. So that you know, the fat learning module is learning module 2, the protein learning module is learning module 3. So there will be, within learning module 2 and 3, there'll be 1 discussion in each, 1 quiz in each. So by Friday at 11:59 p.m., you do have 2 discussions due, fat and protein discussions, and then 2 quizzes due, the fat and protein quizzes. I did update your grades today for the carbohydrate information, so you could check back on those. All right, I think I'm going to just start with the blood glucose story. So what happens is when we eat carbohydrates, regardless of what food source those carbs come from, it's all going to turn into glucose. So if it comes from a simple carbohydrate like carbs that are in fruit or dairy or sugar, or whether it comes from a complex carbohydrate, the carbohydrates that might be in whole grains or vegetables, really doesn't matter. It will all turn into glucose. So I'm just going to draw the G for glucose. That's within the bloodstream. Now, what the difference is if we eat simple carbs, the glucose goes in really, really quickly, and we have a large amount of glucose in our bloodstream if we consume simple carbs. If we consume the complex carbs, we'll have a lot less glucose in the bloodstream, and it'll trickle in slowly over long periods of time. So we're going to eat carbs and we get glucose in the bloodstream. That's what we're saying here. Now, to stay healthy, we want to have a blood glucose level between 80 and 120. 80 is the low, 120 is the high. And just so you know, there are some certain organizations like the Nursing Association and that actually want the blood glucose a little bit less than 80 to be normal. There are certain medical groups that think 70 is normal. That was lowered a few years ago from 80 to 70 as a lower threshold, simply because they were trying to control the issue of diabetes. And they thought if we start at a lower baseline, maybe we'll have less incidence of that. I'm okay if you want to go with 70 to 120. I just, for simplicity's sake, like to keep it one interval. So whether you choose 70 or 80, that's okay. When we wake up in the morning, our blood glucose is fairly low. Our blood glucose should be around 80 when we wake up in the morning because we haven't eaten for a long period of time. Depending on what you eat, what types of carbs you eat, whether they're simple or complex, and how much you eat, will dictate how high your blood glucose rises. Okay, so it's going to go up after each meal, and that's normal. So after breakfast, let's say it goes up to about 130, okay? Then what we have is a hormone called insulin. Let's see if we could draw this in slowly. We have a hormone called insulin, and what this will do, it's going to pick up the extra blood glucose that's above 120 and put it in a storage site, right? And there's 1, 2, 3 different storage sites we could put the extra blood glucose. So insulin is the hormone. It will take the glucose that's above 120 and put it into storage. The first storage site, if a room was available, would be in the liver. The second would be in the muscle. And in those 2 sites, we call the glucose that's rebonded together, the extra blood glucose. Once it's in storage, we call it glycogen. So liver glycogen or muscle glycogen, once it's stored. Let's say the liver and muscle were completely filled up. There wasn't room to put any extra glucose in either of those spots. Then we turn it into body fat. Okay. So what we want to do is focus on that number 2, the muscle. We want to make sure that our muscles have a large enough space to store. And that would be by weight training to make them wider, by stretching to make them longer. So we have a good storage space. And then we want to exercise every day and be physically active every day so that we're using that muscle glycogen that's already stored. We're using that up. And then when we have our next meal, the glucose will have room in the muscle to be deposited as muscle glycogen again. If we're not using up that muscle glycogen and we're not being physically active, the muscle may not have room to accept glucose that needs to be stored, and then it'll spill over into body fat. Okay? Let's say we're having our breakfast and it takes about an hour and a half to go back to normal. And we'll go down a little bit again. Maybe we have a snack, lunch. Same thing happens. Everything from lunch that's a little bit over 120 goes into storage, dinner, and then kind of back down here towards the evening. So that would be a healthy, normal pattern. Okay. I'll talk a bit about what happens if we go below that lower threshold of like 70 or 80. And we would have a hormone. If we were down below 80, we would have a hormone called glucagon. And if we were less than 70 or such, what this would do is it would look in the storage sites and see if it could find anything like muscle glycogen or fat, take it out of storage, right? And then put it back into the bloodstream. So if we were running really low because we didn't eat breakfast, we didn't eat any food today, this glucagon hormone, written in green there, would look at our storage sites, would look in muscle glycogen, look in body fat, and say, can I find anything in storage that I could put back in the bloodstream to keep the normal range of 80 to 120, right? Because this normal blood glucose, this range of 80 to 120, the glucose that's in your bloodstream, that's what your brain uses. So it has to be normal to be healthy. If it keeps getting lower and lower and we do not have much available in blood glucose, like we're at 50, our brain cells may start dying. And so that could be, unfortunately, devastating to our health. If it went low enough, eventually we could potentially die from the low blood glucose, but we don't want that happening. So we want to have healthy, adequate stores of muscle glycogen. We want to have healthy, adequate stores of body fat. There is an amount of body fat that we should have. And we'll study more about body fat in the future, but women should have about 20% body fat and guys about in the teens, like 10-15% body fat. So that if we needed stores, whether we're going to use it for exercise or we're going to use it for our brain, that we would have that available. What I can say, I'm going to just change a different color here. When we exercise, we're going to use what I've just circled in orange. We're going to use muscle glycogen and body fat when we exercise, okay? If it's really high intensity, it's mostly muscle glycogen. If it's lower intensity, it's more of the body fat that we're using for fuel. And then what we have in the bloodstream right here, I've said it before, but this blood glucose is really what your brain uses, okay? All right. What I'm going to do now, does anybody have questions on this? You can raise your hand or type in the chat room. Well, as you're thinking, I want to say that this story, this blood glucose story, hopefully you told someone that over the weekend, but the blood glucose story will dictate how we get body fat, how we lose body fat, where our muscles get energy from when they want to work, where our brain gets energy from when it needs to think. All right, Patty, do you have a question?
Yes, you said low intensity uses body fat or glucagon. Which one was which? I'm sorry.
Are you talking about the intensity?
Yes.
So when we have really high intensity exercises, like an all-out 1 rep max, a slam dunk, hitting a baseball as hard as we can, a sprint, that's muscle glycogen usually. Most of the fuel will come from muscle glycogen in high intensity. The lower intensity, like if we were walking, sleeping, just doing light chore, more of the fuel would come from body fat.
Thank you.
Okay. Mhm. And then to elaborate a little bit more on that, our muscles have, if we're in really good shape, okay, we're good physical shape. Let's say we work out 3 or more times per week. When we're in good physical shape, our muscles have about 40 to 45 minutes of muscle glycogen available to use before it runs out. Okay. Well, we think about people in poorer shape. Let's think about somebody who doesn't work out at all. Maybe they only have like 5 or 10 minutes of muscle glycogen available to them, right? So they can't, the people that are not physically in good shape can't do a lot of high intensity exercise because the fuel is not available for them, right? So what we would have those people do is start working out, maybe that 10 minutes of a little bit higher intensity to clear out the muscle glycogen. They could keep working out, but it would have to be at a lower intensity so they can use the fat. Fat takes a long time to turn into glucose, and that's why we can only use it at low intensities. We would encourage everyone to keep working out, whether you're doing high or low intensity, and there's different ways you can be effective. It doesn't matter if somebody said to me, I only want to do low intensity. I could get you in good shape that way. If somebody says, I'd rather do high intensity because I don't have as long a time to work out, we could get you in shape that way. But you should know by now where the fuel is coming from. And let me give you another example. Let's say we have someone who's out of shape, who has too much body fat, and they come to us and they say, could you help me get to normal body fat and lose a little bit of weight? And I say, okay. So there's 3 things we got to do to get to normal body fat. Question for you guys. What were those 3 things we should do to get to normal body fat? You could type them in the chat room. What are 3 things we need to do? And I mentioned this the first week of school. I'm going to give you about 30 seconds if you guys can type it in the chat room. 3 things to get to normal body fat. 3 things we have to do consistently, meaning almost every day of the week. Patty said workout. There's 2 kinds of workouts, so elaborate on that. Eat healthy is one of them. And then with the workout, we want to say we have to do cardio. And what else? Amelia has cardio. What's one other type of exercise we need to do? Weight training, very good. So on most days of the week, we have to eat healthy. About 80% of the foods, right? 80% of the foods we eat should be healthy. We need to do cardio about 30 minutes a day, and we need to do resistance training. Every major muscle group twice a week. So if we had someone who was over fat, overweight, wanted to lose weight, what I would have them do is eat healthy clearly. But then when they're exercising, I'd say, well, let's do maybe 5 or 10 minutes of higher intensity. That will get the muscle glycogen cleared out. Then we're going to lower the intensity and keep going. Okay, keep working out so we can use body fat. Maybe walks. I'm a huge proponent of walking, especially for people who are overweight. It gives us enough time to use body fat for fuel, and we could do that. It's not too intense, it's not too hard, and we should be able to do that for long periods of time. That's how I would go about helping someone, lose body fat. But you got to ask the person, what kind of exercise do you want to do? If they hate walking, maybe we could do swimming. If they hate exercise altogether, we could do a sport. But so there's a lot of variables. But we do a little bit of high intensity and then lower it and work on that body fat. Okay. Any other questions? Otherwise, what I'm going to do, think if you have questions, I'm going to see if we could get this breakout groups. And what would happen is you'd be in a breakout session with maybe 4 or 5 other people. And I just want you to talk a little bit about the blood glucose story, and maybe talk a little bit about the different types of exercises you guys do. And just, I'm not going to quiz you on anything from the breakout group, but I just want to make sure that everyone is understanding the blood glucose story. Maybe talk about the exercise you do and where you think your fuel comes from, if it's muscle glycogen or if it's body fat. Talk about when you're eating your meals, if you think it's going into storage as muscle glycogen or if it's going into storage as body fat. Any questions for me before we do that? All right. So what I'm going to do,
I have
it
one more
says,
question. I'm sorry.
go
So
ahead, Patty.
would like so I know core would be like considered more of a high intensity workout, but would you consider like weightlifting to be more of a low intensity or still high intensity?
Did you say weight training?
Yes.
Okay, very good question. You could do both. Um, okay, let's put it this way. We could pick any muscle in your body, but half of our muscle fibers are what are called slow twitch muscle fibers, and they do uh, low intensity like weightlifting. So I like to call it baby weights. So the slow twitch muscle fibers, which we consider lower intensity exercise, could lift low weight, but for long periods of time. So maybe like 2 to 5 pounds of weight, but all day long it can do it. And these are like your postural muscles because you could stand all day long or you can hold your head up all day long. Those are slow twitch muscle fibers. You can consider it low intensity. Those are slow twitch muscle fibers. So they lift tiny bit of weight for a long period of time. The other half of our body is considered a fast twitch muscle fiber. Fast twitch lifts heavy amounts of weight, but only for a short period of time. Okay. So this is good for you guys to understand. When we're doing our resistance training, we want to strength train the slow twitch and the fast twitch muscle fibers, which means we want to do some endurance training, which is low resistance, but a higher repetitions or long periods of time. So that might be doing squats with your own body weight, but doing like 50 of them. That would be slow twitch muscle fibers. We also want to work our fast twitch muscle fibers, which lifts a heavy amount of weight, but for a very short period of time. So to train our fast twitch muscle fibers, we might need to do a squat holding like 100 pounds in our hands. We might only be able to do about 4 or 5 reps of that, but that trained your fast twitch muscle fibers. So what I feel like, sometimes people come to me or they come to us, because we're all going to be helping people eventually, and they say, well, I'm doing all 3 of these things consistently. I'm eating healthy, I'm doing cardio, and I lift weights. But when we talk to them about what kind of weights they're lifting or what kind of resistance training they're doing, maybe they're only doing baby weights. Maybe they're only squatting their body. Maybe they're only lifting, 2-pound dumbbells. We're only working out half your muscles then. If we could add in a higher intensity exercise that trains the fast twitch muscle fibers, you're going to be their best friend because within a month they're going to lose weight, right? You've just kicked in 50% of their muscle fibers that were never working. And you said to them, let's hold a really heavy weight and we'll do some arm curls with that and we'll do some squats with that. And all of a sudden you got half their muscle fibers awake, which had been sleeping for the last 10 years, right? And they start losing body fat really quickly doing it that way. So reflect back on yourself first, and then we'll do some case studies in the future. We talk about those 3 things that we have to do consistently. Are we eating healthy most days of the week? And you're going to learn all about healthy eating. So far, you know, healthy carbs, right? We'll do healthy fats today too. Are you doing 30 more minutes of cardio every day? And are you doing resistance training? And we could break that resistance training up into slow twitch muscle fibers, endurance, or fast twitch muscle fibers, heavy weights. Okay, I know that was a really long answer, but I probably should have said that anyway. I would have liked to teach that part anyway. Any questions on that fast or slow twitch muscle fibers? So I think you all know we're supposed to work out, but hopefully this class is teaching you like how and why, right? Okay, let me see. Breakout groups. It says here, I'm going to try to do 4 groups. Do I want to do 4 or 5? I'm going to do 5 groups. You're going to randomly be placed in a group. And again, if somebody could take the initiative to kind of start the conversation and say, do you guys understand the blood glucose story? What happens to the food we eat from breakfast? Where does it go in origin in the human body? How do we put it on body fat? something to that effect. Also say hi to each other. I was just going to do this breakout group for like 5 minutes or so and then bring you back and see if we have any more questions on carbs. If not, we can move on to fat. If you guys are stalled and bored with the blood glucose story, if you think you know it all, just kind of, besides introduce each other and be friends, but maybe talk a little bit about what kind of carbs you eat. That's an easy conversation to get going. Are they simple carbs? Are they complex carbs? What are your favorite carbs? Things. Okay, I'm going to start you in the groups now, and I will see you back in about 5 minutes.